I'm here in Lviv at the end of my trip. I've traveled over 3,000 kilometers in the past couple of weeks. Behind me is a poster that says bravery has two colors. I began my trip by picking up medical supplies in Warsaw. I crossed the border. I then went down to a children's hospital in Ivano-Frankivsk. We delivered those medical supplies. They told us more of what they needed. I'll be bringing that information back to the UK so we ensure the children, but also the soldiers, have what they need. I then went from Ivano-Frankivsk down to Vinica. In Vinica, I met two of my buses that are transporting women and children and elderly men away from the war zone. A lot of the women and children that I met had come from around Mariupol. The stories that I heard from them were terrible, and I've talked about them before, but certainly there have been war crimes created everywhere, and the stories that I heard from them just back up those war crimes of rape and theft and abuse and so on. I then went from Vinica and said goodbye to the women and children and the soldiers who were grateful for taking the women away and children away so they could get on and fight. I then went up to the capital, Kyiv. And in Kyiv, probably my most memorable experience was going to Bucha and seeing the site of the largest mass grave site of this war. The destruction in Bucha and next door in Irpin was terrible, and those images will be forever imprinted on my mind. I then went from Kyiv all the way across the country to Kharkiv, right on the edge of the war zone. In Kharkiv, I had an opportunity to meet the mayor. The mayor's in an underground bunker. We had a good talk about what his needs are for the local community, what we can do in terms of busing the vulnerable, and so on. Above and beyond that, again, the amount of destruction in Kharkiv is terrible. I think I posted earlier images in the underground where I think currently there are about 15,000 people underground, but at its peak, so far over the past 7 weeks, there were 100,000 people in the underground sheltering for safety. The final part of my journey was down towards Izium. Izium again is currently being attacked by the Russians. We picked up a bus of women, children and elderly men, 48 of them, and moved them 1,200 kilometers across the country back to Lviv, where I am today. Probably my most memorable, positive feeling, certainly, of this whole trip was collecting an old man at the side of the road down near where I collected the women and children at my last bus trip. He had escaped from Russian territory with friends, with the help of friends. He had had to bribe Russians at checkpoints. I think he paid them something like 70 euros, which just shows how dysfunctional currently the Russian military is. But really the highlight was that 48 hours later, I went to visit this same old man, a guy called Alexander, who is now with his son, his daughter-in-law, and his daughter in a small rural village about 30 miles away from where I am now. And that just showed the sort of good work that I'm trying to do to help bring to safety women, children, and elderly men. I fear this is just the beginning of a long journey for me, because I feel this war may well continue. There'll be increased demand for the services that I'm trying to provide, which is to try to get women, children, and elderly men to safety in Ukraine and away from Ukraine.